Good morning. I know. Okay, so the sound problem is fixed, and my apologies for your difficulties last week. Let's get started. We're economists, right? We talk about prices, quantities. Those are our first items of interest. And last week we began to talk about what is quantity for a macroeconomist, right? Because when we said quantity in the board marker market, okay, it was clear. We're talking about the number of board markers produced, number of board markers sold, okay? When we said quantity for Turkey, it was less clear what we were talking about. Then hopefully we agreed on a definition, right? The gross domestic product is a good measure of the country's whole production, the quantity, okay? So today's business is the next item. That is, what is the price? Okay? Are prices high or low in our country? So this is a very stupid question that you should not answer. Okay? Because compared to what? Okay? Are prices high in our country? I don't know. So if you're comparing to your income, it could be high, right? If you're comparing to the average prices in, I don't know, poorer countries, okay, it would be high. If you're comparing to prices in richer countries, it would more likely be lower, okay? And there are reasons for that we will get to at some point. Now, whether prices are high or low is one question, okay? And that's an ugly question because the basis is not very clear. But I could ask you a different question. Are prices going up or down in our country? This is easy, and this is your, test yourself whether you're awake or sleeping in the middle of the morning question, okay? Are prices going up or down in our country? This is easy, right? Prices are going up. Now, but you should think of this. Which price are we talking about? Is the price of every single item in the country going up? No, that's not right, okay? If I asked you this question 10 years ago, the answer would have been yes. The price of every single item would be going up, okay? Now that's no longer the case. So what made you say the prices are going up? So look, this is how this class is going to be most of the time, right? We're going to formalize things that you have a gut feeling for anyway, okay? Nothing is going to be extremely surprising for you, okay? It has to be a class of the kind that will say, yeah, I kind of knew this already, but I didn't know how to say this, okay? I mean, you live in this country, you're all intelligent people, you do know and you have the feeling that prices are going up, okay? Now I'm asking you to make this statement more precise. What does it mean that the prices are going up? Is the price of every single good going up? No. If prices of all goods are not going up, what does it mean that prices are going up? Nah, not quite. So the point here was we're growing. We are growing, that's a different point, okay? We are not growing this year, that's a different point. And growth and prices are related at some point, but this is not a why question so far, okay? This is just a statement of fact. When somebody asks you, okay, what is happening to the prices? You say, it's going up. And that is the right answer. But you should have a better definition of the price, okay, to talk about this properly. So let's do that. Let's give you the tools to be able to talk about prices. This is going to be extremely easy and extremely important, okay? Because this is one of the most important things in people's lives. Everybody in our country talks about this. About 99.5% of the people talk about the wrong things when they talk about this, okay? So you should be in the other 0.5% after this lecture. here are the things that we need to talk of. We want to talk about a price level, okay? This is the answer to the question, are prices high or low, right? What is the level, okay? Then we want to talk about changes in prices, okay? And that's going to be inflation or deflation, okay? Then we're going to talk about changes in prices. That is going to be disinflation. And that's what's going to confuse people the most, okay? Not you guys. Now, it should be rather clear to you that since you answered the question, are prices going up or down, okay? That was this. You must have some feeling about what this is and which way this is going, right? So the first question is, going back to the initial point, the price of what? Okay, what are we talking about? For the macroeconomist, the price level is not the price of the board marker, or the price of the potato, or the price of the car, or the price of the pencil, or the price of the antifreeze, or the price of the massages, okay? It has to be some economy-wide aggregate price measure. So one thing we could do is we could take all prices and average them, right? That would be the average price. Would that be a good measure? We're going to take all of the prices in the economy, okay? We're going to add them up and divide by the number of items. It's going to be the average price. You would understand what that is measuring, okay? Would that be a good measure of something? Would it give you some idea about whether prices are high or low, whether prices are increasing or decreasing? So it would give you some idea, right? I would tell you the average price in the economy is going up. You know what an average is, okay? However, it would have the following problem. Okay, so the problem that we're going to face is the following. We're going to add the price of a car to the price of a bread, okay? And we're going to average these. The problem isn't that the price of a car is high, the price of the bread is low. The problem is, are these things of equal importance? Okay? What happens if the price of a car goes up by 1 lira? Does this have a huge effect on our lives? No, right? Whatever, okay? In fact, if the price of a car doubles, okay? Now when I say, rather than going up by 1 lira, if it doubles, okay, that would have an impact. But now let me ask you the following question. Which one is worse? The price of a car doubles or the price of bread doubles? Okay? Good. We live in the same country, right? We're a country of bread eaters. And we do care a lot if the price of bread doubles. Okay? Good. So we need to have some average that says the average Turk eats a lot more bread compared to eating cars. Okay? We consume a lot more bread than we consume cars. So somehow our average should reflect the fact that in our consumption, bread has a much larger share than the car. Okay? That is how I could say, look, the prices are going up, and that's a bad thing. Because now I know. Right? So now I have to formalize this vague idea that I want the price level of something that corresponds to the average Turk's consumption. Okay? Now that would be a good thing to measure. So let me ask the good question, okay? The correct question the economist would ask is the following. How much did it cost to buy your average consumption basket, your average consumption bundle last year? How much does it cost to buy the same things this year? Okay? Now, That's the price level question, the first one. How much does it cost to do your consumption? The price level. What is happening to that price? How much more do you have to spend to do the same consumption? That is the change question. Okay? If the answer is positive, if the price of your consumption basket is going up, you're going to say, this country has inflation. If it's going down, you're going to say this country has deflation. Let's write this down properly. Okay? So we're going to say, before we answer the price level question, and before we answer the question about its change, we have to answer the question, the price of what? Okay? The obvious thing is the average price of consumption. Then we ask, whose consumption? Now here's a very useful word that you should already know probably. Household. Do you know what this is in Turkish? Hane halkı. A household does not have to be a family. Okay? A household is defined as a group of people who live together and who do consumption decisions together. Okay? Now, you live together, you work separately, you pool your income, you spend together. Okay? A family is a good example, but it does not have to be a family. Right? If 4 of you gang up together, right, find a flat in somewhere in Küçükesat, live together, right, and decide that you're going to buy things together, cook together, okay, not just physically share the same space, but really live together and consume together, that would make you guys a household. Okay? So the question that we're going to ask is, what does the average Turkish household spend on? So you know the answer, right? The answer is bread. But it's not just bread. It's a lot of things. So our statistical institute does a survey. Okay? It goes to households and asks, what did you spend? What did you spend on? What did you buy? Okay? And they're very good at what they do. So they get the answers like, okay, this percentage of my income was spent on, or rather, I spent this much on bread, this much on milk. Okay? And this is very detailed. Every month, on the 3rd of the month, they announce what this thing is, what happened to prices. Okay? And they announce it based on how much the average Turkish household spends. So if you look at that release, which you will this week, you're going to see it reporting things like the items for which the price increase was the highest. Okay? And the answer are going to be things like cucumbers, okay, tomatoes, and then men's trousers, female haircuts. Okay? So they don't just do like trousers. They do men's trousers, women's trousers. Okay? They just do skirts because there are no men's skirts in our country. But once you have that long list of things, okay, so you know that the average Turkish household consumes this much bread, okay, 37 breads a month. I'm making number up. 1/10 of a car. I'm making number up. Okay. 1 hour of massages, 1 hour of 102 lectures, 1 hour of, 90 minutes of going to a football game, right? The tickets to a football game are things that we consume. Okay, the football game is a service. We consume that service. We buy the ticket. If the price is going up, I'm worse off, right? I have to spend more to buy the same service. So they look at the households and they ask, this is important, what is the average household's consumption basket? Okay? The consumption basket is really the answer to the question, what does the average Turk spend on? This much bread, this many cars, this many hours of entertainment of a special kind. Okay? all goods and services you could think of. Once you know the answer to this, you know a lot about these households. Okay? Now, our statistics institute, sadly, refuses to give us decent information on what this thing is. Okay? All they will tell you is on very broad categories. So they will tell you, the weight of alcohol and tobacco is this. The weight of non-alcohol, food and drinks is this. Okay? We would like to know a lot more. We would like to know what exactly is the weight of bread in that food category. Okay? They won't tell us. And you should think of why they wouldn't tell us. It's hard to come up with a good answer to that. Okay? But we don't know this as well as we should. They do. Okay? The statistical agency knows exactly what those weights are. So they asked the question, okay, so for January 2010, let's go to the market and let's try to buy this consumption basket. Let's try to replicate the expenditure of the average Turkish household. Let's ask the question, how much does that cost? How much does it cost to buy this basket? Okay? What's the answer? The answer is the price level. Okay? Next month, they say, okay, let's go and look at exactly the same basket. This is important. Let's change the prices, but keep the quantities constant. Let's ask, how much does it cost this month? Okay, buying exactly the same stuff that we bought last month. Sorry. That's another price level. I knew last month's price level. I knew this month's price level. Now I can properly answer the question, are prices going up? Okay? The answer is yes in our country. Prices are going up. That's what we call inflation. Okay? Inflation is the increase in the price level. Could the consumption basket be getting cheaper? Did it ever happen to you in your lifetimes that buying the same stuff was cheaper this month than last month? Yes, it did. Okay? So again, this is the kind of question that you answer almost by gut feeling, right? You're hardwired to answer, ooh, this is a high inflation country, prices always go up and they go up a lot. That's no longer the case. Again, 10 years ago, the answer was no. Now the answer is yes. On a monthly basis, we now routinely have deflations. On a monthly basis, okay? Especially in summer months. So when you look at, for example, the July and compare it to June, it turns out buying the consumption basket is actually cheaper. Why is that? Who's talking? Yes. It's exactly about vegetables and fruits. Okay? The tomato example and the cucumber example were not random examples. These items in summer months top the list of things that have gotten the cheaper the most. Okay? You live in Ankara, right? You understand that come August, all of this town will be flooded by Ayaş tomatoes. They're great, and they get cheap. Okay? So buying your consumption basket, since it has a lot of tomatoes in it, is now cheaper. This doesn't mean that the price of every single item is lower, right? That was the whole point. We're not measuring individual items. We're measuring the price of the consumption basket. Okay? You could also say, this does not accurately reflect my consumption basket. I don't eat as much bread. I don't eat as much tomatoes. Say I eat no vegetables at all, right? My mother failed utterly in raising me up. I don't eat my vegetables. In that case, my consumption basket doesn't have any of these seasonal stuff, right? I don't eat tomatoes. I don't care if their prices go up. I don't care if their prices go down, okay? But again, just like our inflation measure doesn't measure the price of every single good, our consumption basket isn't about each particular household's consumption. This is the consumption basket of the average household. Okay? The closer you are to that average, the better inflation captures what happens to your expenditure. Now, your homework for this week, you must have guessed, would be finding these numbers, right? What is happening to the prices in our country? The price measure that we're talking about is called, when we're doing this over the consumption basket, the consumer price index. Do you know what this is in Turkish? Tüketici fiyat endeksi. TÜFE. Okay? Could we ask the same question for producers? Would the following be a well-defined question? To do production, now, when we were households, when we were the consuming units, we asked the consumption basket question, okay? What does the average Turkish household eat, consume? Can I ask, what does the average Turkish firm use to do production? Well, let me try. I can ask this, right? What does the average Turkish firm use to do production? Can I learn the answer to this question? Can I do the exact same thing I did with the households, with the firms? Could I go to these firms and ask, what do you buy to do production? Sure. Okay? What would the answer be? Very good. The answer would be a producer price index. Okay? And this would be what in Turkish? Aferin size. Üretici fiyat endeksi. Okay? ÜFE. That's what those two things are. You guys don't care about this. Okay? You could look into the items that has the highest and lowest price increases in this. And the answer will be like, I don't know, flat steel, whatever chemical, right? And you would go, yeah, I never ate ammonia, okay? I really don't care whether the price goes up or down. However, you should, because if this thing is going up a lot, it means the cost of the producers are going up a lot, okay? In general, that means very soon after, this guy is also going to go up, okay? Not always. If you look at the numbers, you're going to see that this thing is very volatile. It shoots up a month, comes back down another month, shoots up a month, comes back down another month. Why? Because, for example, think of the oil price, okay? Oil is important for you as a consumer when you buy gas for your car. It's here, okay? It's a lot more important for producers. It's a larger share in the production process, okay? The oil price is very volatile, so it jerks around this measure a lot. Now, we understand. Let me ask you one question. What is with the index here? Why isn't this the consumer price level, but the consumer price index? Or what is an index? So, look, you've been living in this country for about 18 to 20 years, right? And you've been reading some newspaper for about 11 to, I would hope, right, 13 years of that, maybe longer, okay? So you've come across these things every single month, at least once in your lives, right? And you never wondered what this is? It's kind of interesting, right? So that puts you in the same league as I. I learned what inflation is from Fatma Tashkın when I was taking my 102 lecture here. And I never asked why this is an index. But I should have. So let me give you a hand. You can actually see these numbers. Okay? Go to TÜİK's webpage. They're going to report what these numbers are. And those numbers are going to be things like 137 plus 6.6, okay? 138.9, okay? So this is for 1 month, this is for the next month. Now, what is this 137.6? It's the index itself, okay? But what does that mean? Does it mean that buying the consumption basket costed 137 lira 0.6 kurush? No. Since you understand what the distinction between real GDP and nominal GDP is, since when I say real GDP, okay, you ask the question, okay, this has to have some base, right? I'm fixing the prices somewhere. Which year is that, right? You understand that the same thing goes on with inflation. I'm choosing a consumption basket. When am I choosing this consumption basket? Are we using yesterday's consumption basket? So in Turkey now we're using the 2003 consumption basket, okay? And the way this is calculated is you're going to say 2003 average price level, I'm going to call that 100. Okay? That's what turns it into an index. I'm going to normalize the 2003 prices to 100. Given that, okay, whatever month is 137.6. This immediately tells me that, okay, the price increase between these 2 points was 37.6%. It went up from 100 to 137.6. Okay? That's what an index is. You're not looking at the raw numbers, raw underlying numbers. You're turning them into percentages of a certain time. Okay? Think about this for a little while. There's nothing interesting going on there. Okay? But you should know what this is. Now, I calculate my consumer price index. So I know what the index number is for this month. I know what it was for last month. I could look at the percentage change. What is the percentage increase in the expenditure I have to do to buy the same consumption basket? Okay? Is this a good question? It's a very good question, right? You know how they stop little old ladies on the street in TV, shove a microphone in their mouths and ask, what is your biggest problem? Right? What do they say? So there's a very established clause in Turkish, right? It's the cost of living. In Turkish we call this hayat pahalılığı. Okay, we'll get to that. Okay? The cost of living, right? The little old lady or the little old guy says, when I go to the market, it's very expensive to fill up my shopping cart. Okay? Now, is that a statement about the price level or about the inflation? Is she saying things are getting more expensive, or is she saying things are expensive? Is that a statement about the level or the change? It's the level point, okay? And people always confuse these two. The problem is this. Inflation is the change in the price level, okay? Is inflation going up or down in our country when you look at long trends? Say, compared to 1990s, is inflation up or down? So in 1990s, you were like this tall, right? But you should know this. You can't remember it, but you should know this, okay? At some point in 1995, inflation was 156% in this country, okay? Inflation from the year before to the same point this year was 156%, okay? What is it now? What is the inflation rate in our country? What? 9 isn't too far off, okay? It's 8 something. I'm not going to tell you the number. I want you to be curious enough and people of this country enough to take a look at that number, okay? Because if we asked you guys, what are the biggest problems in this country? Inflation would be in the top 5, right? So you would answer inflation without knowing what inflation is. That's something you should not do. As a broad trend, inflation is falling in our country, okay? The fact that inflation itself is getting lower is called disinflation, okay? Now, this is the key. We have the price level. The price level is the root of our measurement, okay? We'll look at how much does it cost to buy the consumption basket. The change in that, if it's positive, is inflation, okay? How fast is the price of the consumption basket increasing? That's the inflation, right? Now, is the increase in the price of the consumption basket faster this month compared to last month or slower? Okay? Now this is a tricky thing to think of, okay? I'm going to very slowly define this again. If you've taken calculus, this is very easy to understand. Level, derivative, second derivative. Okay? You have the prices. You take a derivative, that's the change. If it's positive, you call it inflation. You take a derivative of the inflation. If it's negative, you call it disinflation. Prices are increasing, but they are increasing at a slower rate. Okay? That's what disinflation is. Fiyat düzeyi, enflasyon, deflasyon, dezenflasyon. Okay? We have a rich language. Now, is our country going through disinflation? Disinflation requires, when you ask inflation and disinflation, okay, you have to specify the time periods, right? When you ask what is the price level, it's clear what I'm talking about today. It's today's price level. When I ask what is happening to inflation, am I comparing this month to last month? Okay, say, am I comparing January 2010 to December 2009? Or am I comparing January 2010 to January 2009? Am I looking at 1 month changes or 1 year changes? Okay? I have the answer to both of those. But you have to know what you're talking about, right? In general, the better answer tends to be the annual changes. The reason is the following. She knows why. Okay? There are a lot of goods for which the prices are extremely seasonal. We know that compared to June, okay, prices in July, at least in the past few years, tend to be slightly lower. Okay? That's because tomatoes have gotten cheaper and cucumbers have gotten cheaper, right? But does this mean that we're having a good July this year? It just says that Julys in general are better months to buy the consumption basket compared to June's. Okay? But does this say anything about this particular July? It does not, right? You could ask, however, how does this July compare to last July? Okay? Now I'm looking at the same season, the same month. What happened over the past year? Right? Have we seen a deflation when we look at the annual numbers? So on a monthly basis, we have seen these deflations, right? Some months were cheaper than the previous month. But on an annual basis, when we compare this month this year to this month last year, did we ever see a negative number in our lifetimes? Did you? How old are you?
20.
You're 20. So you've been around for 20 years. Have your consumption gotten cheaper over a year in any one of these 20 years? No. Very good. Okay? That's the answer. It hasn't happened in the past 20 years. It hasn't happened in the past 35 years either. Okay? And I would hope that you'd be curious enough to look up whether it has ever happened in the history of the Republic. The good measure of inflation is looking at inflation on an annual basis. Okay? Monthly numbers are all over the place. They move mostly for seasonality, mostly for smaller stuff. Okay? Smaller meaning conceptually less interesting stuff. The annual numbers are more important, and by that measure, our country and almost every country in the world always has a little or a lot of inflation. Okay? Annual deflation is rare. Would this be a good thing? Would it be better if prices were falling? Would it be better if things were getting cheaper? Right, that's not a difficult question, right? And this is a surprising question, because the answer is yes, it would be terrible. It would be terrible. And it requires us to talk about quite a bit of economics machinery to understand why this is not a good thing. All right? But in general, the idea is the following. If you ask yourself, given my purchasing power, given nothing is changing with me today, would it be better if prices were lower? Obviously, the answer is sure. Okay? But you have to ask, why would prices be lower? Right? In general, the answer is, when this happens, it's because nobody wants to buy anything. That's why prices are lower. If nobody wants to buy anything, would people produce? Would you find a job? Would you have any income to spend? Okay? So this usually goes with bad times. And you should know this because last year, the whole world had a deflation scare. A lot of central banks were really, really frightened that their countries would have a deflation. Okay? Does this actually happen in any country in the world? Yes. Who said that? Japan. Japan has been having a deflation on and off for about 20 years now. Okay? And the Japanese economy is in terrible, terrible, terrible shape. Okay? So you wouldn't want this. You don't want the inflation to be high, but you don't want it to be negative either. Now, let's talk about this inflation bit. If we looked at, let's say this is 1970, this is 1980, okay? This is 1990, this is 2000, and this is 2010. And this is inflation in Turkey. That graph looks something like this. Never. Okay? This is by and large correct. Not exactly correct, but we had this huge crisis in 94, 95, right? And then this one you should remember, right? In 2001. In both of the cases, inflation shot up. Let me ask you a question. We had a terrible year last year as well, right? Did prices shoot up? No. Which country are you living in? Inflation in 2009 was lower than inflation in 2008. Okay? It was a bad year, but inflation fell. That's a first. So ask yourselves, why is 2009 different from 2001? Why did prices go up so much? Why was inflation so high in 2001 when it was a bad year? And prices actually didn't increase that much in 2009, which was also a bad year. That's a very good question. Right? And we're going to get to the answer to that. It doesn't fall that much, right? It's more like something like this. Okay. So, what's this? This is this inflation, okay? Look, here we're looking at inflation. This is already the change in the prices. The fact that these are always positive says prices have always increased in our country. Okay? This is correct since 1970. Prices have always increased. Okay? Sometimes they increased a little, sometimes they increased a lot, but they always increased. Okay? It was around these times, say from mid-1980s to 2000, okay, when you ask people, what is your number one problem? They always said inflation. Okay? They always meant the cost of living, but they always said inflation. Okay? And that's a problem, because inflation is now much lower. We lived through a very, very successful disinflation. Okay? Our inflation rate is now a respectable inflation. It's still high compared to where we would like to be. Okay? So it's closer to 9% this month, and say the European Union average would be something like 2%. Okay? However, the European Union average has been around there for almost 15, 20 years, whereas we used to be at 50%, 60%, 80%, 100%. Okay? Now we're in the same ballpark. Now we are safely in the single-digit inflation zone. However, here's what happens. You tell people, inflation is falling. That's disinflation. Okay? People do not know what inflation is. Okay? So invariably, whenever there is a lot of talk of inflation is falling in our country, some idiot in some newspaper writes a little essay that essentially says, the statistical institute says inflation is falling, but when I go to the market, nothing is cheaper. They're clearly lying. Invariably. Okay? Don't be that idiot. Know the difference between inflation and the price level. Inflation is falling means the price level is increasing less now compared to before. Okay? It doesn't say things are getting cheaper. If you don't know the distinction between the cost of living and inflation, you would write such stupid things. Okay? If you thought that disinflation is a decline in the cost of living, you would want to see negative numbers. Okay? However, disinflation is a decline in inflation. Let's talk about this once more, take a little break, and then talk about this again. Okay? And this is one of the most important things you're going to learn. I told you in the very first lecture that this class is going to have about 4 weeks of learning the definitions. Okay? That is the most important thing you're going to learn. Right? Because we agreed on this, right? You all thought inflation is a big problem. And I'm fairly sure I showed you that you also did not know the distinction between the cost of living and inflation. Okay? And you should. How are you going to talk about the problems of this country? Okay? Unless you understand how to talk about it, what the terminology is. Disinflation is a decline in the rate of inflation. It is not a decline in the price level. What do we call it if the price level is declining? Okay? You have to know the distinction between deflation and disinflation. One is prices are falling, one is inflation is falling. Okay? When inflation is falling, prices are still increasing, but less fastly. All right? Take a break. Be back here in 5 minutes.